glasses are hard to see, and that is just fine with me. Modus ponens is the plan. Serve you logic, I am.
Hey, converted man here.
Dear Father Spitzer, please give us a foolproof argument for the existence of a creator. I'm assuming that means that a fool like me can understand, but I think maybe this is the bigger part, because they admit it's a tall order. But is there some proof that atheists cannot deny? Thank you, Father. God bless you. Sylvia in Miami, Florida. So that would be the question. When discussing things like the existence of God with an atheist, is there one particular argument that you find most effective?
Oh man, you love how he changed foolproof to most effective argument. Like, yeah, we don't have a foolproof one. I also like how he equivocated foolproof to try to make some sort of joke, like, oh, it's like a fool like me could understand. No, that's not what foolproof means, you Nimrod. Come on, you know, and it's a tall order, right? Like, no, it shouldn't be that hard. Like, even an atheist will see that this argument is just amazing, right? Which would be a foolproof argument, right? But we're going to equivocate on foolproof, and then we're just going to go ahead and screw the whole idea of giving that argument. But we're going to give a most effective argument. What are we, playing Pokemon now? Alright, anyway, so I'm on the edge of the seat of my chair. What? Is that how that phrase goes? Whatever. Here's his argument. Are you ready?
Well, I think the one that's probably the most effective comes from Bernard Lonergan, who wrote a book called Insight, a study of human understanding. And in chapter 19, he gives a proof for the existence of God. And the proof runs like this, and I'll try and explain it a little bit in a moment. If the real is completely intelligible, then God exists.
The real is completely intelligible, then God exists. That's what he said. If the real is completely intelligible. Well, the sentence isn't intelligible, so I guess God doesn't exist? Like, if I don't make sense out of something, then God doesn't exist? Or, like, if we can't make sense of something, then God doesn't exist? Or does it mean that it will always make sense? Or, like, eventually we'll figure it out. What does this mean? I don't know! Therefore, God can't exist! What happened to the logical fallacy counters? They just disappeared. Why? Oh, that's right, because there's so many fallacies here. Let's begin! Alright, let's go over the formal fallacies. Failure to give an argument in proper format because he only has one premise, you need two or more. Malformed sentence, invalid disjunctive syllogism, and invalid hypothetical syllogism. So those last two are because of the malformed sentence, and also he gains those because of improper format. So it's kind of all of that. Now the failure to give an argument is because, well, there isn't an argument. It's just this one thing said, and then the next thing. Now, he calls this a proof, but that's not how proofs work either, so it still would not be an argument. And so it's not a syllogism, and it's not a proof. The only thing I can do is analyze this within informal logic. So if he was going with a proof, that would have been great if he had given that, but he didn't give that. He gave this, which I tried to make into a format that sort of works, but it doesn't work. Alright, so if R equals CI, then G, but he didn't have G within the first part there. That's, you know, he could have fixed that with a second premise, but he didn't. So this is a non sequitur. I thought there was more, but there isn't. So that's the only logical fallacy, is that, you know. Which is pretty good considering that you didn't have an argument. So, moving on.
But the real is completely intelligible, therefore God exists. Now, I know that's a mouthful and the word intelligible is big, but it's based on the good old Aristotelian proof. Goes all the way back to Aristotle's physics and metaphysics. What Aristotle tried to show was that, you know, look, you can have, the whole world could be caused causes. And what he meant by that is, if something is literally nothing before it is caused.
Okay, Aristotle fans, tell him how wrong he is about what Aristotle said and how he said it in the comment section below. I'm sure you'll have more fun than I will. Back to the fallacies.
Now pretend that the entirety of reality is composed of those things. They're literally nothing before they're caused.
In the beginning, there was a whole bunch of nothing, and then nothing, some more nothing, still nothing, and then nothing. And wait, and then the lobster came, and it got big, really fast, and then the lobster made everything.
Well, that means that all the causes of all reality would be nothing because they have not yet been caused, in which case the whole of reality would be nothing.
Non sequitur, red herring, and of course failure to give an argument. So, doesn't follow because nothing plus nothing does not necessarily equal nothing. And in fact, we have no example of nothing to talk about, therefore we can't say anything about nothing. Yeah, everyone got that? Yeah, okay. And this is one giant red herring because this has nothing to do with the real being intelligible, whatever the bleep that's supposed to mean. So, just because you have a universe coming from nothing doesn't make it more or less intelligible than if you have a universe coming from nothing because of God, or the universe coming from God, I guess. So, but then where was God? Like, how does that work? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Wait, if I don't know, then it's unintelligible. And isn't God supposed to be above and beyond our understanding? Which means if that whole thing there is true, where the real is intelligible, then if their God exists, which is not intelligible because there's no way any of us could ever understand it, then God can't exist, because then that would make the universe and reality and the real not intelligible. Oops, sort of a problem. We're going to ignore all those problems because we're doing apologetics. Back to the video.
So he says, hey, look, if all of reality requires a cause in order to exist, if all of reality is nothing before it is caused, then the whole of reality is nothing, but that's clearly not the case. So there has to be at least one reality that has to be uncaused.
Hey, remember the thing that I said last time? Yeah, it's still that.
And that's where we get that traditional notion of an uncaused cause. I mean, I don't think any atheist can get out of that proof.
Not only does this not convince any atheists or skeptics, but it could never do that. There's so many problems that you have to resolve. First, you have to show an actual nothing somehow, because that is a scientific claim. You're making a claim about reality and saying that a literal nothingness once existed and that from that you can't get anything else. But you have to show that's true. It's not enough to just say that it's true. It's not enough to try to argue that it's true, because you still ultimately are making a claim about reality which falls into the venue of science, leaving behind informal logic. So, the only way that you could have a logically coherent argument for it would be to have the science for it, which you don't. And nobody does, because we don't have an example of the sort of nothing that you're talking about. On the other hand, we do have a hypothesis from Lawrence Krauss, who has a different idea of what nothing is and how it would function. Now, whether that proves to be the case is a different story. But at least you have a model there. Here you don't really have a model. You're just saying this is how it is, without explaining why. If you have no rules, then there isn't anything to prevent something coming from nothing, because there isn't a rule saying that that has to be true. So, without that explanation, you don't have a working hypothesis. But it's even worse than that, because you're not arguing that it came from absolute nothingness. What you're saying is that you can't have anything come from nothingness unless you have a God, which then brings about everything from nothingness, except its own self or own power. And also you have to show that that is the case, that it is a God, rather than some other uncaused cause, which would require a huge amount of arguments and or evidence and or tests that you also still don't have. But all of that is not really important in regards to the quote that you started out with that you thought was just so compelling, that the real is intelligible, therefore God. Because none of this other stuff has anything to do with that quote. So, that's a problem. And if what I said earlier was correct, that God itself is unintelligible, then the idea that the real is intelligible, which then would mean that there couldn't be an unintelligible God, which means we would have to be able to understand God, which, according to your theology, I would assume and guess, would not be a thing. If you can understand God, then you're equal to God. God is above and beyond us and incomprehensible. So if the real is intelligible, then there can't be a God. So that's kind of a problem. At least it can't be a God that's unintelligible. So you could, and then words happen. Go back to the video.
For at least one uncaused cause, because obviously if you have an infinity of caused causes, an infinity of realities that need to be caused in order to exist that are nothing before they are caused, they're all nothing in their totality.
I wonder what would happen if you shoved a cat into your nose.
So that, I think, is foolproof. It's the second part of the proof, you know. Well, how do you prove that there's only one uncaused cause, and that uncaused cause is essentially God? And what Lonergan goes on to show is that an uncaused cause has to be perfectly intelligible.
So the author goes on to explain why it's only one. I'm not going to tell you that, but he totally does that. Why is it one instead of a million? Because the author says that. So I'm not going to give you the argument, but yet trust me, it's totally legit.
That is to say, the uncaused cause, or any uncaused cause which stands at the basis of all reality, will have to answer every possible question that can be asked.
I don't know about that. Let's test this out. What does God taste like? Oh man, the answer is God. Of course, God tastes like God. Okay, what's the difference between a raven and a writing desk? It's God, oh my word. Okay, what is the square root of 7,582? It's God! Oh my word! He's onto something. What lives under a pineapple under the sea? God! Wow. Wait a minute, I think I have one. What is completely and utterly pure fiction? It's God! God is the answer to every question. Ah!
It has to be the final answer to every question that can be posed about existence or reality. And this is a very good proof, and I give it in my in a new book that I wrote a while back, The Soul's Upward Yearning. It's pretty new, and then in another one in chapter 4 called New Proofs for the Existence of God. But essentially, just remember this, and it's very hard for atheists to refute, that an uncaused cause will have to be perfectly intelligible. It'll have to be completely intelligible because it will have to answer every question about existence because it grounds existence in itself. Its existence in itself. It has to be the ultimate answer to all questions. But if it is perfectly intelligible, Lonergan goes on to say, then it has to be an unrestricted act of understanding itself. And then once you prove that, and he can prove that very definitively, he goes on to show that it must be one and only one.
Give that proof in a new old book that I wrote a while ago on chapter 5 or 4. And the other guy, he also explained it. And it's really hard for theists to refute because it doesn't make any freaking sense. So yeah, check all that out.
So essentially, it's a 4-step proof, even though the proof itself, the simple formulation is, if reality is completely intelligible, then God exists, but reality is completely intelligible. So the first thing you have to do is prove that there's at least one uncaused cause, easy to do, foolproof. Second thing is that the uncaused cause must be perfectly intelligible. Third step is to show perfectly intelligible reality has to be an unrestricted act of understanding or an unrestricted act of thinking, understanding itself. And the final thing is to show that that unrestricted act of understanding must be one and only one.
You haven't done that, and you can't possibly hope to do that with this many fallacies. Well, it's not that many. I mean, it's a few. But maybe I'm being too hard. He's winging it. He was asked a question, softball question, and, he's from memory is bringing it up. So, he's not going to be completely on point with everything that he's saying, right? Sure. But here's the thing. An uncaused cause, this is Aristotle's, unmoved mover, that's been debunked several times in several different ways within informal logic and even formalized logic. So there's multiple ways to refute that argument. I coughed because I didn't want to say quote, but I said quote anyway. Anyways, my point is that this guy wants this to be the answer. It can't be any other answer. If we allow even the possibility that it's any other answer, then you're not a theist. You're not an apologist anymore. You become something else. A skeptic. God is one of many possibilities of possible answers. But this God that this guy is talking about isn't even a possibility because it's self-contradictory. Unless God is in fact logically incoherent, which would then fold in on itself because that wouldn't be coherent. Is God a part of reality, or is it above and beyond reality? If we can't understand God, then how can we hope to understand anything about God through argumentation? The uncaused cause is an infinite regress stopper, because we don't like infinite regress. But it doesn't stop anything. If God has a thought, what was before that thought? Either you have nothing before that thought, or you have other processes. Well, but God doesn't work like we do, which then means that God is incoherent, which then means God can't be in reality. So we're right back where we started. Your God is impossible as an explanation. Other God concepts and models can work as possible explanations, but you have to be honest in saying that their likelihood is at least as likely as the other explanations. But no apologist has ever admitted to this. There's a little bit more from him, but it's more of the same. He just essentially repeats himself over and over again about how wonderful this argument is and how atheists can't dare try to take it down or whatever. It's more nonsense, and I'll spare you from it. We have no empirical evidence. We have no repeatable test. And we certainly don't have a logically coherent argument. And unless and until we do, we must continue to be skeptical of the conclusions. Alright, I'm hiding the formal fallacy counter for now because I have to focus on the informal fallacies. And to do that, I need to make this into a thing that I can do that with. So if R is CI, then G. So that is the formal... not formal. That's not a formal.